Welcome to Rewatch-and-Rank. On this channel, we rewatch older TV shows, provide a summary and opinion on the episode before ranking each episode against each other, and today's episode is Hannibal Season 3, Episode 8, The Great Red Dragon. Episode in a nutshell is a brief reminder of what happened within this episode. So, we begin with a bit of a Hannibal montage of the last season, of him turning himself in, of him being arrested and processed, and then him in the prison cell. And in between all of these events, we see him sitting on a chair while a young choir boy sings, and he is surrounded by nuns. Then we get a little bit of a blurb on screen that there has been 3 years that have passed, and we arrive at Alana talking to Hannibal while he is in his prison cell. She drinks wine outside of a glass wall that's between them, or probably not glass, but some sort of clear materialed wall that's between them. And they talk about taste, and she talks about how he managed to avoid the needle by pleading insane, and that his insanity plea was accepted, and so he will now spend the rest of his life under her care in the state institution. And at the end, he then confirms his promise to kill her, eventually at some point, saying that he always keeps his promises. We then move on to our new serial killer, Francis Dollarhide, and he's a bit, they really want to drive home that he is a bit off. And we first see him looking in a cracked mirror and hearing high-pitched noises and making weird sounds and grunting. And then we kind of see, after he looks into the cracks of the mirror from the side, like it's the most fascinating thing in the world, we then see him walking outside in the moonlight covered in blood. And then Hannibal has dessert with Chilton, blood and chocolate, and confirms that the last time he served Chilton this particular dessert, the blood came from a cow only in the derogatory sense. And Chilton brings up the Tooth Fairy and how he's writing a new book about the Tooth Fairy, having written a book about Hannibal previously that has earned him some acclaim and money. And Hannibal gives his insights on the Tooth Fairy, that the Tooth Fairy doesn't like being called the Tooth Fairy and is shy. But Chilton kind of disregards that, and then once he leaves Hannibal, ends up speaking with Alana, and they do kind of imply that they played a part in the insanity plea going forward, as they wanted to keep Hannibal kind of within sights, given that he, at least to Alana, has promised to kill him and has tried to kill Chilton previously as well, using Miriam Lass. So there's that. And then we again get Dollarhide acting super weird, this time with a projector instead of a mirror. You know, he's using the projector, so he clearly knows what it is and how to use it, and yet somehow when he ends up in front of it, he gets super freaked out by the light and starts swatting at it, and it's just weird. And then we get a bit of another montage, this time paralleling Hannibal and Dollarhide cutting out a newspaper article for the Tooth Fairy, and Dollarhide puts it in his scrapbook, which also includes articles on Hannibal as well, showing that he has an interest and knows of Hannibal's existence. Hannibal, he cuts out the same article, however, he writes a letter, and we see him writing at the top of the letter, "Dear Will," before Jack pulls up to Will's new house. and basically tries to drag him into the Tooth Fairy case. And Will is like, you know what, I'm healthy. I don't even think I could do that anymore. I've moved on. I haven't called you because I didn't want to, because I'm in a different place now, a good place. I'm married. I've got a kid, all of these things. And then Jack ends up staying for dinner. And once Will and Walter go out to walk the dogs, because of course there's a lot of dogs, Jack then preys on Molly a bit, like her empathy, and she's like, you're gonna drag him in whether he wants to or not. And Jack's like, I wish I didn't have to, but I have to, and gives her pictures of the families that have been killed. And so later that night, once Jack has gone, Molly then talks to Will and is like, how are you gonna feel and deal with it the next time an article comes out, knowing that you could have helped? Like, I think that you should go with it. And he's like, if I do this, if I get back to that mindset, when I come back, I'm not going to be the same. And she's like, but I'll be the same, meaning like that he'll have something familiar to return to. And so after she falls asleep, Will gets up and he goes to a drawer where he takes out the letter that Hannibal wrote to him, and he reads it, and Hannibal's voice narrates for us, the audience, the letter, and then he burns it. We then see Will at night going through the crime scene from start to finish, and then we of course get one of the classic pendulum swing episodes where he then backs out and recreates the crime from the start, narrating what the design of it is. And then we get Jimmy and Brian arriving at the morgue where they then process the bodies before everybody regroups in the lab, Jack, Jimmy, Brian, and Will, to go over their findings and discuss, the bite mark, some of the discoveries, like Jimmy found a fingerprint on the mother's eyeball, for instance, and of course there were bite marks, and so they got an impression of the teeth, and so on and so forth, basically going over their evidence so far that they got from the scene. And then Will goes to see Jack in his office and tells him that he needs to see Hannibal in order to recover that certain mindset that he needs to be able to solve crimes as he did before. And then we see Will arriving at the prison and standing there in front of Hannibal and saying, hello, Hannibal. And then Hannibal says, hello, Will. And we end the scene there. And I think that was a great ending for the episode. So now that we've been reminded about what happened in the episode, we will now rank the episode. And as always, we'll be ranking the episode on our mostly objective ranking list first, followed by the personal ranking list. So as always, we're going to start with our mostly objective rank values, and we start with our multi-episode supporting character introductions, and these are each worth 2 points. We have Frances Dollarhide, the Tooth Fairy / Great Red Dragon. Then we have Molly, who is Will's new wife, and then we have Walter, who is his stepson, and that brings us to 6 points. Then we have our multi-season supporting character developments. We learn that Chilton wrote a book on Hannibal, that Alana has Chilton's old job at the state institution, which I think was the Baltimore something of criminally insane. I can't remember, actually, other than those bits and pieces. But anyways, Alana is now kind of in charge of Hannibal, and her desk is in front of the clear wall, which Hannibal is behind to keep him under surveillance. And that is worth another 3 points. And then we have the positive 4 points, which is the very fact that Will ended up getting married is a multi-season main character development, which brings us up to 16. And then the negative for this episode was worth -2 points. And that, of course, was the implication that Alana and Chilton played a part in Hannibal's insanity plea going through, and that they did so because they wanted to keep Hannibal in sight. Because I guess when you have someone like Hannibal who's like Hannibal, you can probably bet that if he was in like a standard institution, he probably could break out pretty easily, and so they want to keep him happy enough to stay behind bars and under their sight because they understand how dangerous he is, given that they have been victim to him before, and once again, probably in the future, as he has reiterated and reconfirmed his promise to eventually at some point kill Alana. So that's obviously very unethical and, messing with the justice system and preventing true justice from being able to go through by, falsifying that has like an insanity plea in order to keep him there because that also avoids the death penalty. So ultimately, like I said, -2 points still leaves us with 14. This is a 10 out of 10 episode. Bringing us now to the season 3 rankings so far, and on our mostly objective ranking, we have in first place Dulce, Digestivo, the Great Red Dragon. This episode is third. Primavera, Aperitivo, Antipasto, Contorno, and then Secondo in eighth. Now, my personal rankings for this episode were that it was very much a catch up with everybody episode. We got a bit of a flashback to Hannibal's being processed. Then we get their time skip, so then they basically give each character a little bit of time to say, where are they now? After 3 years. I never really understood why Will had to get married. I mean, I know it shows that he's in a healthier place, that he's even in a healthier place than he was before episode 1 of the series, because now he actually is able to move on to be in a healthy relationship with a stepchild. And had Jack not appeared, potentially they could have had their happily ever after. But knowing what I know as this is a rewatch, I'm kind of like, I just feel bad. Not necessarily for her because she's aware of his past and, what he did and his damage and whatnot, but for the child, because obviously the child already lost one, like his real father. Now, spoiler, but in the future he'll lose another father figure, and it's just like that much loss at that age. It's like you didn't have to go through that. So I like, did that have to be an aspect of the story? I don't necessarily know that it had to. Of course, I know that it's based on a book, so if they were in the books, then fair play. But if they weren't, then I don't see why they had to be added. But I don't hate them like as characters. I'm just saying like I don't necessarily know that they added anything that was necessary that couldn't have been done without. Obviously, the classic pendulum swing is classic. Francis Dollarhide, it's never been a killer that appealed to me personally, and frankly speaking, part of that is because his introduction is just that he is a weirdo, doing weird things, and I know that's because he thinks he's turning into a dragon. I get it, but at the same time, I'm like, at this point, we don't know that that's what he's doing, and he just looks like, I don't know how Will's gonna get in the head of this one, kind of feeling. Um, and then, oh, but the ending. I loved the ending with the whole, oh, 'cause like, okay, so back in season 2, of course, we had the roles reversed where Will was in the cell and Hannibal was outside it. And then, Hannibal comes to see him and he's like, hello, Will. And Will's like, hello, Hannibal. And now we have the reverse where Hannibal's behind the glass wall, like in the institution, the prisoner, and then Will's come to visit him, and then he says hello Hannibal, and Hannibal says hello Will, and obviously I am a fan of Will and Hannibal's relationship, platonic though it may be. I think that this show, if they could have managed it, would have made a great two-man show. I don't really care about the other characters really at all, to be honest. I mean, I understand their necessity as far as moving the plot along, but for me, Hannibal has always been the Will and Hannibal show about Will and Hannibal. And so when they interact, I'm always like, this is why I watch this show. This is the fun part for me. This is what I find interesting, how they interact and everything. So that ending of the episode with them finally meeting again after 3 years, especially given when Hannibal was arrested, he said that he was letting himself be caught so that Will would always know where to find him, and now Will is finding him. And that just, made the episode, even though it was the end of the episode. There was also some pretty good imagery in this episode. I mean, the fact that the blood looked like black ooze in the moonlight was really good imagery. There was imagery of Hannibal having a pretty cushy life in prison, to be honest. Like, because he's in an institution, like, he's still able to do all his drawings. He's got like a nice fancy desk. He was able to make a dessert for Chilton, so he's obviously got access to cooking supplies, so he can still make his culinary wonders, and sketching Alana, so he's got, everything. He can pen his letter to Will and send that out with the newspaper clipping. He's got access to the newspapers. He is living it up. So that's fun too, but obviously when he's cooking, we see, the close-ups of all the ingredients coming together, and then they eat the dish. There was also some imagery with like mirrors replacing like the eyes and the mouth, which Dollarhide then polished to be able to see himself in it. And the location where Will lives now, beautifully scenic. There's one of those classic like acrylic painting scenes where they, mirror, like they have like the trees and then they mirror them in like a lake, and it's like this is in real life. Absolutely gorgeous setting that he moved to. And then again with all of his dogs, and married somebody who also really likes dogs. So overall, I did like the episode, but also it was building up to the future because basically, my understanding, I usually don't talk about background stuff because I usually just watch what we as the audience see, but in this case, I feel like it's jarring enough to mention. I have read online, and whether it's true or not, I can't say because the internet isn't always accurate, but from what I have read online, accurate or otherwise, there was originally supposed to be 2 seasons here, and they had to mash them together because they only were renewed for like the 3 seasons. And so that is why there's such a jarring difference between the first half, those first 7 episodes, and now 3 years later, these second set of 6 episodes. And so it almost feels like we're starting a new season, even though we are halfway through this season. And that is why it kind of feels like we're getting new information, but it also feels like it's building to something, but we're not there yet. So it's interesting, but there's definitely room for more excitement and more things to happen. And so I gave it a 7 out of 10 for this episode, which brings the season 3 ranking so far on the personal ranking to in first, Dulce Contorno. This episode came in fourth for me. The Great Red Dragon, Aperitivo, Primavera, Secondo, and then Antipasto is in eighth for me. Which now brings us to the series ranking so far. And on our mostly objective ranking, Season 2 ended with 86.92%, Season 1 with 83.85%, and Season 3 so far has 68 points out of a possible 130. On the personal ranking side, Season 2 ended with 88.46%, Season 1 with 66.92%, and then Season 3 so far has a score of 52 out of 130. So with that, we've now rewatched and ranked Hannibal Season 3, Episode 8, The Great Red Dragon. Like and subscribe if you'd like to, and I'll see you in the next episode.